Okay, welcome back to the Jiu-Jitsu Mindset. It's Pete Deley, solo without Professor Lucas today, but I'm going to do my best to soldier on. Professor Lucas is a new dad, but I am now a new grandfather. So I have my first baby granddaughter is born about 2 weeks ago, and once again, I've seen the power of submission coffee to keep people alert. If you want to get yours, it's at thejujitsumindset.com, along with a bunch of t-shirts people have asked me about. Submission coffee remains a non-classified performance enhancing drug. I have a real pleasure today to talk to Professor Gustavo Dantas, who's got so many things that we could talk about. We're going to do our best to do a few things thoroughly rather than cover everything because his life has got lots and lots of stories that I'm fascinated by. But Professor, thank you for making time for me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. I love to participate. I do run my own podcast, but I love to chat with people, go to different podcasts, and talk a little bit about my journey, the mission that we have here in Arizona,
hmm
and yeah, glad to be here.
And since you mentioned it, let's tell everybody your podcast so that way they may want to find you later.
Yeah, the BJJ Mental Coach podcast we started in 2018 and basically dedicated to entrepreneurs, high performers, high level athletes who have jujitsu in their lives.
hmm
And so that means it could be range from blue to black belt, but just basically getting all the lessons that we learn from jujitsu training, competition, and how can we implement them in business
Yes.
and in life in general, because that's the big touche, to get all those lessons and
Right.
implement in our lives.
Yeah, and that's very much the premise of what, we try to talk about here because the time on the mats is short and the rest of your day, you need to take what you're learning on the mats out into your life. And most of us are not going to end up competing for Jiu-Jitsu World Championships. So the lessons are more applied to everything else. So uh, that's a very consistent theme that we have here. When I was reading about you in preparation for this, I mean, you have a journey from Brazil to the United States that is organized around pursuing jujitsu, and you're have competed at the highest levels in world competition. Jiu-jitsu has been such a central part of what I perceive to be your whole life. Um, Before talking about that, I'm curious if you had brought that passion and energy to something else, what other direction do you think you would have pointed that in?
Well, I felt that when I was a child, I was looking for an activity.
hmm
Unfortunately, my mom, single mom, two boys, and doing the best she could, so we couldn't really afford participate in programs or.
Sure.
I was really into, like most of the kids in Brazil. I was really into soccer, but I
Right.
never had the opportunity to play in any league or participate in one. But I felt that was I was just walking around trying to plug in my energy into
Yes.
something. It happened it happened that ended up being jujitsu. My dad got exposed to. I didn't grow up with him,
hmm
but he was exposed to jujitsu in the early '70s, late '60s,
Interesting.
and so my brother's 4 years older. So he used to show my brother some stuff, and then my brother would say like when I turned 18, because in Brazil that's when you start driving.
Right.
I'm going to train jiu-jitsu. So I used to say like I'm going to train jiu-jitsu too. So I was always aware jiu-jitsu wasn't famous or anything like that, but I was aware of the existence.
Right.
And so yeah, when he was 18, I started judo before,
hmm
and a few months after I started, he stopped and his life went towards triathlon, which he's still involved to this day.
Okay.
And I since then I was 14 to 15 that I started jiu-jitsu and put all my energy into that. So it happened to be jiu-jitsu, but I was so craving to a sport, an activity.
Right.
And for sure if I was involved with soccer, I tell people that I'll most likely soccer would be I would be doing something related to that. I'm not saying that I would be good enough to be a pro
Right.
player or
Right.
anything
Right.
like that, but I truly believe that if you have you have a passion, it's possible to make a living with any activity. Some of them are absolutely tougher than others. There's
Sure.
no doubt about it. But sometimes you see people who are, maybe they are doctors. They're they're not very good players, but they're so passionate about soccer. Now they put their whole lives into sports medicine, try to go to
Yes. Right.
work on a field or be the doctor of a famous soccer team, and ends up. So I believe that everyone could live around your passion.
Right.
Again, some are tougher than others. Jiu-jitsu is not an easy route. It's a lot. I would say that it's easier now,
Yes.
but
Yes.
back in the 90s, when you say that I'm gonna make a living in jiu-jitsu, and people be like, "You're gonna do what?" Before internet or anything like that. So
Yes.
yeah, I took some heat from my family. Yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, that's a brave disposition to have enough conviction that like I'm going to do this. Where there isn't, in many ways, you're one of the people forging a roadmap for how that can happen because there wasn't those structures prior to that. But so there's not a so it sounds like something involving a physical relationship to the world would have been, if not jujitsu, it would have been perhaps another sport. But so there's not a universe in which law or science or anything was necessarily going to capture you. It was always going to involve the body. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and when it got to a point I was 17, 18, and that phase that the parents gonna ask, what are you gonna do,
Right.
for a living? And that's a part that even in Brazil, I would say, like, around the world. But let's talk about my experience that it's in Brazil.
Hmm.
The You need to figure out, are you going to college or not? What are you gonna do? And and I decided, because back then I it's it's not like it is right now. I'm going to open a jiu-jitsu school and there's, you rent a building, you do it in Brazil. That's what I saw, was basically a fitness gym. And
Right.
then there is a room that people rent and run jiu-jitsu classes. So in my mind, I thought that this was going to be my future. Okay, I'm going to own a gym, a fitness gym,
Right.
and I'm going to have a jiu-jitsu program inside. And in Brazil, it's interesting how in Brazil, a lot of things that a lot of people don't respect as a
Okay.
third world country. However, regarding to fitness and becoming a personal trainer, for example,
Right.
uh, I'm sorry, but in the United States, it's kind of a joke. You do a weekend course, now you can be a personal trainer after
Right.
a weekend course.
Right.
And in Brazil, that doesn't fly. You do need a physical education degree for 4 years.
Okay.
So I thought, well, to make a living with this, uh, fitness and jujitsu, I need to go to college for that. So that's what I did. I went for physical education,
Right.
and my mom was not very happy,
Okay.
because that's when you start having that argument of, you're gonna be broke, you're not gonna make any money, you're not gonna be successful.
Right.
However, so for everyone listening home, each one of you have your own perception of the meaning of the word success. What does success mean?
Right. Right.
Right. So in my case, I was young, but I already had the feeling that no one's talking about money.
Hmm.
I'm talking about just pursuing something that I really want to do.
Right.
And I was very blessed that she made all the efforts to put us in good education, even though she went through all of our struggles raising two boys without no child support or anything like that. And but she was able to provide us with good education. So I was able to, in Brazil, you can go on once a year. You can apply to go to college, to go to a uh, like a free college. That means like a federal
Right.
school.
Uh-huh.
So I was able to do the test, qualify, pass. So I went to school for 4 years for free. So that means she couldn't really say anything. Say like, "You're
Yeah.
gonna
Right.
pay all this money?" Be like, "Well, no one's paying
Yeah.
anything." You know what I mean? At least. So I was able to
Sure.
put all my effort into that, and as soon as I graduated, just everything was. I felt like finishing a cycle in Brazil at the same time. As soon as I was finishing other things, getting my black belt, and and then starting my journey in the United States.
It seems like at an early age you had like a lot of clarity and like internal direction to where you want it to go. I mean, that's I think unusual for people in general, and I think many people never develop quite that ability to focus on I know that I want to go in this direction. What's the next step to move me along in that? Uh, you know, my family history in the 1920s, both sides of my family come through Ellis Island and land in New York's, the boroughs of New York, as immigrants. And I grew up in New York, as a child in sort of communities that were my father was Irish and he came from an Irish kind of enclave, and my mother was Italian. She came from the same thing, except it was Italian. And there was people that had been there first generation, some, or some as many as two or three generations. And I always thought that the immigrant journey was an extraordinary one because it required so much flexibility, so much discipline, the ability to understand rules that people may not explain to you, but you got to pick them up on cues. In the discipline you had that took you from, being a high school student into college and knowing that that was the next step. Can you tell me a little bit about the immigrant journey for you and your decision to take your dream outside your own country into a new country? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I never thought that I was going to live abroad or anything like that. I thought that I was going to leave. I grew up in Rio,
Right?
and I saw the explosion of jiu-jitsu in Rio that started in 1991
Okay.
after the big jiu-jitsu versus luta livre, because they show on the biggest channel in Brazil,
Okay.
global, the global TV. And then 1993, they had the first national competition with UFC. So 93 really took off, but 91, that's really when I started in 89. But 91, that's when you start noticing, like, wow, there's more schools popping up. So I saw the pattern of growing. And by mid 90s, I started getting involved in teaching. And I noticed, and not in a very good area. And I realized, man, I'm gonna have to leave Rio. I never thought I was going to live abroad again. No internet. I had no idea. I
Sure.
did have the desire to travel up internationally, starting international competitions because all the competitions were in Brazil. So I
Right.
had the curiosity, but I wasn't even aware of how to go about it. I feel that now, 50 years old, I look back on my journey after many years of working on personal development and therapies and retreats and
Sh-
understanding myself, like you saying, having that clarity. I think the clarity when I look back, I feel that it's very important that everyone who is listening, I like to talk with you and the listeners who
Yeah.
are at home or driving, doing whatever. I feel that we all need to do the best to be have clarity. What are your values, and do the best to
Yeah.
live in congruence with them. And I know that sometimes tough with the resistance of you have to want to do something for a living, but then the resistance of parents saying, like, like I said, I went through, well, we're not going to make any money, or we're not. But I felt when I was 12, I by accident I just went to discover this many years after doing therapies and so forth, that I discovered my number one value. Unfortunately, my mom was with a crazy person. There was a lot of domestic violence and rough period in our lives that I felt like I was always grounded, couldn't do anything. And I just put something in my mind that I said, like, I don't know. I didn't know what I was going to do for a living, but I
Hmm.
knew that I don't want, I want to make sure that I don't want to work for anybody. I don't want to have to tell people what to do. So that's the only thing I knew. So
Okay.
basically, there it was my stamp of my number one value, which is freedom of choice.
Right.
Of course, there's a price to pay for the freedom of choice.
Right.
Many times you're gonna have to work in a lot of jobs that maybe you're definitely not happy, but it is what it is. I have to do it. But that came my mind, my freedom of choice of I want to do whatever I want to do. And I'm not thinking about money. I'm not talking about money. So that kind of carried me along to everything I did was when I discovered jujitsu by maybe 2 years in,
Hmm.
2 to 3, I figured out that okay, this is the thing. This is I'm gonna make all my effort to make this happen. From coming from a not a very good school,
Right.
struggling competition or having results, to eventually start to get a little better. And then I had the opportunity, long story, but I had the opportunity to come to compete in US in 1998, stay for 10 days, looked around, and I said, this place is amazing.
Yeah.
I said, I can easily live here. People respect the traffic lights. This is incredible. So the streets were clean. So I said, yeah, this, and then opportunity present itself. And then I came. So I feel that the word that any immigrant that goes anywhere, and I'm talking about even just changing, moving to a different state.
Yeah, right.
That's already takes courage.
For
You're
sure.
moving away from family, from friends, for the unknown per se. But yeah, when we talk about a different country,
Yeah.
that's a different conversation, language, culture, and I feel the key word is courage
Yes.
to just go, and who knows what's going to happen. And yeah, so I lived 24 years in Brazil and 26 in US, going into 27.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and when I think of my parents who left what was the most familiar enclaves of the most familiar cultural enclaves that they knew, right? They knew the Italian community and the Irish community. And then they moved from New York to California when I was young. And although it's not as dramatic as moving from one country to the next, it had echoes of that experience because we went from being, regardless of the fact that we didn't have any money, when you didn't have any money in the context of like an extended community, there was lots of people taking care of each other in that it made that reality less obvious. And then once we moved to California and we were just on our own, all of those things became very apparent because there was no one to say, "Hey, can you help out with this and help out with that?" Um, so the moving from one country to another to me is an courage is exactly the word that comes to mind. Was there a mentor along the way? Because you were such a young man and this is such a big change. Did you have a guide in this journey, or were you just on your own and figuring out as you go? Because you couldn't even at that time go to a YouTube and say, "Well, how does this process happen?" Like I, there the research that would have been available to you would have been the same that was available. Just slightly older than you, and we would have been in libraries looking at books and magazines trying to figure out things. So was there a person who was helping you, or were you completely figuring it out solo?
I met a person, his name is Steve da Silva. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He lives in California right now. So we met in 1997, back when the world championships were in Brazil. So he
Mm,
went to Rio to train for the competition. And long story, I was learning how to speak English. I had a scholarship in a school for like 3 hours, two classes per week, hour and a half, for
right,
so 3 hours per week for 7 years. So I
right,
had this scholarship. I had to keep my grades, and I was able to keep that. So I didn't have good fluence, but I was, at least I had some vocabulary.
right.
But I never used my English to the until that point. But anyway, so I made the effort to get a conversation with him, became friends in '98. He came back and then issued me this challenge of, hey, do you want to go to US to compete? You can stay in my house. So anyway, long story short, that's kind of how that was my route to the United States. But he's the only person that I knew. So I
Okay,
stayed on his house for 10 days. When I finally decided to move,
right.
and then I met John Lewis, the John Lewis, first jiu-jitsu school in Nevada,
Okay,
and fought in UFC, old school MMA fighter. So he's the one that opened the doors for me. That I applied for my work visa, and then both of them, I'm forever grateful that why I'm here.
right.
And yeah, it's no one really to, I mean, you ask things, especially,
Sure.
again, I didn't know anything. I just sold my car, came here, $2,700, to thinking that I'm balling, and until I go to rent a place, and then like, what's your social security? Like, social what is
Yeah,
it,
right.
what is
Yeah,
social
yeah.
security? Do you have credit? What is credit? I mean, essentially no brainer if you live in a place, but I had no clue of
Yeah,
nothing of
right.
that. So
Yeah,
yeah, so basically in less than 10 days, all my money was gone,
right.
and figured out just when I look back, really, I feel that being young and naive helped me, or
Yes,
just not
right, right.
having a
Yeah.
clue, just like,
Yeah, there
oh,
wasn't
it's
a
going to be
point of
great.
contrast, right? Like it wasn't
Right.
like you had ever had it easy. It doesn't sound like the road wasn't particularly easy up to this point anyway. And then you just traded one set of difficulties for another is sort of what I sounds like to me. So in this time, I mean, you, you're transitioning where you live, uh, you're pursuing the economic security of your life through your passion, and you're also competing at high levels. So maybe you could talk about like how those things all fit together, because it seems like an extraordinary level of discipline to have everything, the wheels not come off the tracks, because all the competitions that you're doing would have required extraordinary preparation. You're trying to figure out, well, how do I rent a place in a new country? The rules are not clear, and it doesn't sound like there was anybody sending you money to take care of you, so you were trying to figure that piece out too. How do all those things fit together?
The thing is that I think people, when they start nowadays, maybe people are competitors. They say, "Oh, I want to be a world champion. I want this and that." When I started training jujitsu, I decided that I want to make a living with jujitsu. There are no world championships.
Right.
There are no, not even a
Yeah.
IBJJF existed.
Right.
So my goal was never to be a world champion. I just want to make a living
Right.
with what I enjoy
Hmm.
doing. That's all. So when I moved to the US, automatically I was young, and I feel like we all go through different phases as we develop, especially being older too, that I see that our emotional intelligence goes from, like, if you put a level from 0 to 100, maybe you're never gonna hit 100, maybe you're a monk or something like that, but
Yeah.
we're not
Right.
gonna, but our goal is to try to push as high as possible. When we're younger, our emotional intelligence, yeah, is going to be a little lower
For
level.
sure. Yeah.
So I just didn't know how to handle properly that transfer to here. People telling me, "Oh man, now that you're doing well here in Brazil, you're not gonna have training partners. You're just gonna go downhill." And I bought it. I
Hmm.
wasn't aware enough to be like, "No, I can't do this." But as soon as you move to another country, that my priority wasn't competing. My
Hmm.
It was survival.
Right.
At first, I came with my ex-wife, so now I have the responsibility of, okay, I need to provide for her. And then a year and a half later, my son was born.
Hmm.
So I wasn't, especially at the beginning, I competed a couple of times here and there, but my mind was completely away from competition,
Right.
for sure. So I went from being on a podium of the very first Worlds on 1996, right?
Right.
So I was able to compete in the first one as a purple belt. So I took third place. And then 97, 98, I won as a purple and brown belt. And then
Hmm.
the following year, 99, I'm working some construction. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not the common pattern, you know what I mean, of the
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu champion or whatever. Because by that point, I'm like, dude, there's no opportunity. There's no seminars back then
Sure.
in 99. There's not really such a thing. So I was doing whatever I could to get by. So I'm not gonna say that I was disciplined with my training and my competition. No, it was a different time.
Right.
I competed when I could, and then I was just really trying to make it happen. So that it was a is a very different scenario of what people see right now
Right.
than what was especially in the United States. In Brazil, late 90s, starting jiu-jitsu taking off and it getting more attention, but in US it was just crawling.
Yes.
I
Yes.
came to Arizona in 2000. There's between 5 to 10 schools in the whole state. Now
Yeah.
there's over 170,
Right. Right.
more.
Yeah.
So that's a completely different thing that people don't realize. So
Right.
yeah, it was as soon as I came here, my mind just completely changed to survival.
Right. And when you looked at the MMA world, I know you had 2 MMA fights where as you're sorting this out, does the notion of you had this early dream in Brazil about owning your own academy and your own gym and how that might have been constructed as you move here. Where did it? Because I'm curious about your MMA fights. Like, were you thinking, "Oh, maybe I could do make money that way," or did you start to like, "Okay, how do I eventually get my own gym?" Because it's not, it surely felt long at the time, but in a pretty rapid succession, you go from how do I rent an apartment to becoming a business owner, and in my opinion, a pretty quick period of time.
Yeah, but the MMA, I never had any intentions of being a pro fighter or
Right.
whatever. It
Right.
was just one of the things that me watching the 1991 Jiu-Jitsu versus Luta Livre. God knows how many times I watched those
Yeah.
VHS
Right.
tapes, because I
Yeah.
was obsessed with that. And then the early UFCs. So that was part of the Jiu-Jitsu culture back then of just, man, I want one day to try to experience what it's like
Yes. Yes.
to be in the ring. So it was never like the intention. It was more
Okay.
that the representing jujitsu type of deal. And then that has, evolved in MMA, but I never had this idea. One of the thing is I felt that, well, if I'm going, and I was in an MMA gym for 12 years, Arizona Combat Sports. So I felt that, well, if I'm going to be with people in their corners, I would love to have this experience as a coach,
Hmm.
even if it's small events or whatever, but just go through the training. I could have maybe like a couple fights more, got canceled here and there, but it wasn't going to be a career. It
Right.
wasn't my goal. I just want that experience of how does that feel. And I wish I had done a few more, but just different moments of life, going through divorce and on that specific area did not. Again, my emotional maturity level, my emotional intelligence level was low. I didn't have proper tools to deal with the internal battles of the
Sure.
negative voice that we all do. No one has breaks, right?
Right.
Everyone has to deal with the internal, external battles. And I felt as younger, I did the best I could, but I just didn't know how to properly deal with internal battles, anxiety, and so forth.
Yeah. When you think about like there's so many things going on in your life in these years. Just I often like to ask like the role of competition in uh, a person's jujitsu development. I have two questions like along that lines for you. One, in those contests, which sounds like in some ways you entered some fights to kind of represent jujitsu, have the experience. Other fights were sort of just a part of your development as trying to get into the community more and more. Do you have one role or fight that stands out in your mind as the most dramatic? And then having had all of those experiences, what you perceive the role of competition in the ordinary person's development of jujitsu? I'm curious about those two things.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. I feel that no one needs to compete to have the benefits of jujitsu,
Yes, right.
right? And
Hmm.
I'm saying even not even once.
Yeah,
You still going to, I see your t-shirt, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
right,
We talk about, it doesn't matter if it's in competition or in training. That's a principle that you're going to be exposed to. So being better shape, the problem solving mindset, all those things that you get exposed to jujitsu, great. You don't need that. However, if you which is an incredible jiu-jitsu is not just a martial art, right? It's a personal development tool, person social development tool. So if you want to amplify the power of this tool, competition is a great route. So
yeah,
when I talk about amplifying, because essentially you're doing the same thing you're doing in training in competition. However, the mental, the emotional aspect gets amplified.
right,
Oh, there's expectation, there's a scoreboard, there's people. That changes the whole thing. With that said, nowadays, as a 50-year-old when I want to, I like to introduce. I'm not like a high level jiu-jitsu coach for competition
Hmm.
anymore. In my school, we have people responsible for that. But I love introducing jiu-jitsu tournaments to people. Would be like, hey, just try, just so you can feel. How do you handle under pressure situation?
Yes.
Do you get overwhelmed? Do your nerves get the best of you? So I suggest to people just, man, try it out, and then you do whatever you want with that experience.
Yes.
So that's why you always hear people saying everyone should compete at least once, just to see like, hey, how does this work? So yes, I feel that it's an incredible asset to be able to go through the training, go through the mental, the emotional aspect. With me, one time I was talking with a friend of mine, and Bruno Basso is one of the most experienced competitor that I know.
Hmm.
And then we're talking about saying like, you're saying jujitsu changed my life. And then I said like, we can get more specific because competition changed your life.
Yes.
Because for anyone who's listening right now, only people who've been training longer and have competed multiple times. I'm not saying that you're super experienced, but maybe if you ask a black belt, let's talk, put an example of a black belt that has competed multiple times in different belts or whatever, and say like, hey, imagine your journey of the time that you've been training jujitsu, whatever. You've been training for 10 years, but you have never participated in any tournament. Do you feel you still get the benefits of jiu-jitsu? Absolutely. Yes, I'll be in better shape, more confident, all of that. Like now, can you compare this with the time that you put in competing in your mental and emotional growth? And everyone start thinking and they realize, man, it's not even close.
Right.
How much more you're going to grow on that aspect. I'm not talking about man and not talking about technically or whatever. I'm
Understand.
just
Right.
talking about mental and emotional growth in being consistently under pressure situation, dealing with the frustration of preparing for something, then you lose, and then you go and then you lose again. Jiu-jitsu, one of the main things you if you have to put, because when we talk about what are some of the biggest lessons or the biggest benefits of jiu-jitsu, we need a podcast just for that,
Sure.
right? Like
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
episode just for that. But I narrowed down to emotional resilience
Yes.
because in jiu-jitsu, especially in competition, that taught me early that you don't always get what you want at the time that you want, the way you want, just because you want it.
Right.
I
Right.
want to win this tournament. I'm going to win now because I want to.
Yeah.
Well, other people want to win as well.
Yes.
And that building that emotional resilience of training, getting getting your butt kicked and then go home and cry in a parking lot and then go back in the next day again, builds that emotional resilience. And competition absolutely elevates that and
Yes.
pushes more that emotional resilience.
I love the term amplification of the benefits of jujitsu. I think I will use that forever now because the concentration of the experience, I mean, I don't think there's any substitute for just time to train. Like, being able to go in as many times as you can in the week for those of us who have lives of children and, jobs, and which is pretty much 99.99% of the people who would ever listen to this. Getting as much time as you can in that experience, I think, is a huge advantage to everything else you're doing. But to have that competition day where so many things are concentrated in the hours of that competition takes all that time that you're spending in preparation and sort of distills it down to a couple of hours and all that. And emotional resilience, I think, is a fantastic expression that I also will use going forward because for me, it wasn't a physically intuitive thing. Um, it's still not a physically intuitive thing for me, my jujitsu journey. I find it difficult and I feel like I'm a very slow learner. Um, and I'm 55, so I'm not threatening to be any fantastic champion in anything. However, when my progress has been just slow and incremental, um, which has required an emotional resilience because my self-perception is that, oh, I'm a pretty athletic human being. So like I'm not used to doing something that I'm not good at physically. Because earlier in my life I was good at other things and I'm like, well, surely I'll be good at this. But not allowing that to exclude me from the experience. I haven't competed in anything dramatic, but I've had my own little local competitions that I've loved those experiences. And it has amplified like all of my training time. Do you have though a role that stands out in your mind? If I was like, does something snap to the front of your mind if I say, what was the most dramatic role or fight you've ever had? Does one pop up as something you'd describe for us?
Yeah, I have a few. I struggle. One of the things that for people who don't know much about my journey or who I am or what I do, one of the things I've been studying for the past 15 years is the mental aspect
Hmm.
of athletes, the BJJ mental coach and everything. And one of the reason is because as I won't 15 years ago, when I say only 15 years ago, because I was in my 35 when I was 35 when I started to get more interested in personal development. I was like,
Hmm.
man, I want to, because as we get older, maybe some of the younger crowd, my crowd that follows my work is 70% 35 and over.
Right.
And from at least for me, I just feel like we start getting older, we start questioning our own selves, like, hey, wait a minute, what do I want? What I want to understand myself better or not. And that's when I started studying. But in the beginning of my journey, I was in a school that wasn't it was more focused on self-defense, which I do like self-defense, but I was young and I was curious about competition. So I was in a wrong place. So I was there for a little bit over 2 years. I I was wearing a blue belt. You hear that I said I was wearing a blue belt? I was not a blue belt. So I was wearing a blue belt back then. And then I competed and I realized that okay, yeah, I'm not a blue belt. And so I started took me a while just going through the growing pains of competition. So losing my first one, second, third, fourth, fifth. Now I'm questioning, can I even win a match? I'm not thinking about
Yeah.
winning a tournament. So that's when the foundation of the emotional resilience and the lesson in jiu-jitsu that it's good for anybody, especially kids. You don't get what you want at the time that you want, anytime you want,
Right. Right.
right? Always gonna, it will take time. And it took me a while to develop my optimal confidence because there's different types of confidence. You have the overconfidence, you have low confidence, and you have the optimal confidence that
Hmm.
you're not underestimating or disrespecting anybody, but you're really confident. Like, man, I'm prepared, and I truly believe that I can win.
Hmm.
So I started jiu-jitsu in 1989. Only in 1997, that was the first time I experienced that in my life.
Nice.
To have a conviction. That's something that Tony Robbins talked about. There's a difference in believing and having a conviction. And
Okay.
conviction is something deeper. And that was the first time I experienced that in my life. So that was the World Championship in 1997. That after that event, not sure the result did did make a big impact on me because it was just traumatic in a way that I was very prepared. That was the most confident that I've ever been going in. And with 30 seconds in my first match, I pulled my rib. I never injured my rib before.
Goodness. Yeah.
So it took me like 2 minutes to just get focused to be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so, anyway, long story short, I end up just having just tough matches, winning by one advantage after that, just doing what I could, and
Hmm.
then I won. But with that said, that it was a time in my life that really clicked. That a key just really okay. You can actually accomplish a lot more than what you imagine.
Yeah.
Being in a horrible situation, physically speaking, and that gave me a huge boost of confidence on not just jujitsu, but I'm saying in
Yeah. Yeah.
life
In
to
life.
be
Yeah.
able to just, man, you came from a very difficult scenario, came back and never gave up. And that really changed the direction of my life, how opportunities present itself, new sponsors that eventually paid for my trip. So it's a whole that effect of recent, just putting a little plug on my newest book.
Yeah, tell us.
Actually, here for people who are, maybe, I don't know if you can kind of see it, but just for people who watch it on YouTube or something.
Yeah, inner discovery for the success, right?
For outer success, yeah. So
Outer
I
success, excuse
talk
me.
about uh challenge and opportunity loop, which is every time, if you think about in your life, or if you're home listening to this, think about one of the most uh challenging uh situations, or that you have accepted in your life, some challenging goals that you had in your life. Most likely that generated some type of opportunity, even if the outcome was not a desired one. There's a massive opportunity for growth,
Right?
right? Or many times this opportunity is just generates a new challenge, that if you decide, like, because I accept this challenge that present itself, I'm going to accept that. And then you do that, and then generates another one, and now you get the loop going, you get the cycle, and it gets more momentum. The more challenges you accept, more opportunities present itself. And I feel that in my life is being like that, from
Yeah.
phases of, for everyone listening, don't underestimate the fact that accepting the challenge of training jujitsu, it's massive. Look at the opportunities that present itself because you accept the challenge of training jujitsu. People that have met you, like, what, because jujitsu in your life, for some people, and others, some people are listening, maybe trained for 2 months, love jujitsu, but stop life, whatever. But for people who still training, be active, and think about it, man, how many opportunities just from training. So in life, you just gotta use that same concept of consistently accepting and upgrading your challenges.
Yes.
First, I was a kid, I accepted training jujitsu. And
Right.
then at one point, I thought, you know what? I want to upgrade this challenge of accepting a tournament, participating tournaments. And then I upgraded even more, said I want to take to another level. I want to make a living with
Nice.
this.
Yes.
And then there's another point that you have to take a leap. And then my leap was like, I'm leaving the country.
Right.
So there's, like, you just keep accepting. So for people who are older, maybe start to come back, and then even in your life, if you go back and think about, look all the challenges you've been accepting in your life to be where you're at today.
Yeah.
So this is the idea of the challenge opportunity loop, that it doesn't end. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about jujitsu. Anything that accept a challenge, and then the situation present itself, and then you decide, do I take this or not? And sometimes people don't, for fear, for insecurity, or maybe buying into whatever others are saying, and they don't take that opportunity. Like, the opportunity is there, you take it if you want it. So when this, or my asked me about this and say, hey, do you want to, so he was in Brazil when he issued me this challenge. What do you think about competing internationally? The tournament would be in 6 weeks from when he was actually he was issuing me the challenge. And he said, like, what do you think? You have two options, either yes or no. And I said, yes, I'm going. Like, nice. Do you have a visa? Because I know that it's tough to have a visa to even go to the US. Like, no, actually, I don't have the passport, the visa, and I don't have the money,
Right.
but I'm going. I just put in my mind that this opportunity present itself. So it'll be a story itself, just to tell you what it took in five to make that happen in 5 weeks. To get to the chance to compete. I'm not even talking about the
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of the
Right.
challenge of the competition. Some people here sometimes take for granted that you just get in your car, you just drive to compete to Pans or to Worlds or whatever.
Right.
Now we talk about other people in different countries, what they're making happen just to be part of the
Sure.
event.
Yeah.
You know, so that opportunity present itself, and I said, I'm going. And then that again, because I accept this challenge, the opportunity itself to be like, hey, have you thought about live in the United States. Like, actually, I've never thought about it, but I like the idea. So because I kept accepting, so you who are listening right now need to think about how many opportunities that present itself for you and you didn't take for whatever reason.
Sure.
You know, a lot of the times because of the internal battles, I'm like, should I go? I'm not sure. So that makes you realize that opportunities, like in jujitsu, opportunities come and go. The arm is there; it's not there anymore.
Right.
The choke is there; oh, it's not there anymore. And you know what's interesting? This friend of mine, that was the last time he went to Brazil. That was 1988, 1998. He never went there again. It goes back. There's no internet. That means the chances of us having this conversation right now would be very slim to
Yeah.
basically none.
Yeah. Well, I mean that opportunity challenge loop, I think, is extraordinary. I think of that sometimes in terms of like the notion of death and resurrection. Like in every moment is dying and leading into the next moment. You know, by the time I'm
Mhm.
done with this sentence, the beginning of the sentence is a memory. And you have to, I think, the saying yes to the challenges. I had a great conversation, a long conversation with Professor Chris Burns, and he was framing his life in the notion of the hero's journey. And our journey is, what are we saying yes to? What are we saying no to? You know, are we saying yes with conviction or with belief? You know, those are all things that I think shape the intensity of our experience. You couldn't have had that changing, um, life-changing fight had you not had such a hard injury. You know, the height of that challenge gave you a level of confidence that you couldn't have achieved if the challenge was less. You know, it was,
Mhm.
you know, as you've overcome that. I there's uh I want to talk to you at length at times about you have a nonprofit and you know your business of coaching people not just physically but mentally and all of that. But for today, maybe we could end with your favorite story of who in your community uh, over this period of time that you've been affecting people through jujitsu. Like, do you have a story of how jujitsu positively impacted somebody that, if I was to say, what's the most dramatic thing you could describe to me? Is there something that pops to mind?
Just give just a briefly explanation what people don't know about Jiu-Jitsu Tribe. I've been doing this work for about 15 years.
Yeah,
The mission is to inspire, impact, and improve impoverished communities in Brazil and US. There's not too many programs in the US, unfortunately, but whatever is around, we do our best to help, utilizing Jiu-Jitsu as a personal and social development tool. So with that said, I get to travel a lot to Brazil to visit social projects. And one of the things to not just visit, now we have our own institute in the south of Brazil. And I feel that my favorite stories are the ones that people coming from those scenarios. Again,
yeah,
people in the United States, I feel that they don't quite realize how amazing they have here. And I have, as a matter of fact, we're recording this in right now, getting close to November now, 2025. And yesterday I posted something on my Instagram. It was a TBT talking about one of the visits that I went to a place that I saw a video, some guys training on the street. Basically, have the mats right next to the street. It's raining, all this. So when I learned about the program, I was like, man, I want to go there. I wanna experience. I want to know exactly what that is. So I went there and met the incredible, not just coach, it's just those are community leaders. They don't fight just you, oh, to keep the program going. No, they fight for their community. They go to the city, they go argue with mayors and that whatever. They are there for the community.
right.
And and I asked, hey, what are one of the kids that stand out here? And then he pointed to this kid. His name is Melky. And so like, yeah, he never competed out of here because he really can't afford. He does well here. He just turned 16 back then. And and then anyway, so I said, not through Jiu-Jitsu Tribe, I do some stuff that is my own that I don't need to give explanation to anybody. Just I want to help you because I want you. That usually I don't put anything out. And there's stuff with Jiu-Jitsu Tribe.
but this one, and then once in a while I sponsor some people. So this kid, from being in an extremely rough situation, family involved with drug trafficking, like it's a
Hmm.
bad, the whole thing, bad deal. And I started to support him. Eventually, sent him to live in Maringá, which is it's kind of the south of Brazil, with a good friend of mine, Rodrigo Feijão, one of the best competition coaches in the world. And long story short, this year he became that might be his last year as a purple belt, but he became Brazilian national champion. There
Oh
would
my
be
goodness.
no way that he would be able to do where he was.
Right.
And when I sent him to 2022, when I sent him to live on uh, with my friend, they had a house for like some of the guys that live there. In 2 months, and that's one of the things that I met him. I said, like, one of the first questions I said, "What is your goal?" It's like, "I want to become a world champion." So like, "Okay, do you have a passport?" I said, "No." "Okay, the first thing you're going to talk about, if you want to travel internationally, you need a passport."
Right.
So when he moved there, in less than 2 months, a situation present itself. He accepting his challenges of going, living, being young, leaving his house, and Feijão got hired to train the Abu Dhabi national team.
Wow.
And then they wanted to him to stay longer. He didn't want to stay. And said, like, "Well, I will stay longer if you can bring 10 of my kids here." And they said yes. And Melky was one of them. So he went to Abu Dhabi, ended up winning the Abu Dhabi World Pro,
Wow.
2 months after.
My
So
goodness.
uh, I'm not trying to impress anybody with like, "Look how great Samaritan I am." It's not about that, but it's just, number one, how amazing you have now, that you train a facility that most likely have a seat, have a roof, to begin with,
That's right.
and accepting challenges and then putting in all his effort right now. He's probably going to get his brown belt this year. And that was his goal, to
Yeah.
be able to pursue. And he's just one example of so many people
Yes. Right.
that live from rough situations in Brazil, and jiu-jitsu opened the doors currently in Brazil. And I've seen a lot of stuff like that. Most likely jiu-jitsu is the profession that opened the most amount of doors in the country as far as profession, because many times you have a college degree, say like, "Nope, you cannot use your degree here. We need
Right.
this. And soccer is big. Like, you need to be incredible, amazing to do something, to just get a visa just to play soccer here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Which is not a big country place. So, so with him, it's just amazing, the opportunity that present itself, and now he's um continue his journey, and I've seen multiple of them, and Jiu-Jitsu Tribe helps
Yeah.
do what we can. You know what
That's
I mean?
amazing.
With those
Yeah.
programs.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I'll tell you what, can you tell the folks listening, like they may want to follow what you're doing, follow these stories. They may even want to contribute to the Jiu-Jitsu Tribe. How shall people find you?
Yeah, just Instagram. Usually that's the busier platform that I use, at Gustavo Dantas BJJ. So I have a link tree there with all the links and things
Okay.
that I do regarding promoting tournaments. So easy BJJL or Jiu-Jitsu Academy, Jiu-Jitsu Tribe, the BJJ mental coach, and then podcast. So just a little bit of everything there. So you guys are information about my newest book too. So
Yes.
anything, and I also started the the BJJ mental coach masters community,
Okay.
which is dedicated to people who are not necessarily, again, it's not about the mat, but people committed to growth on and off the mat, and are into your personal development journey. So that's a good platform for you to check it out as well.
That's awesome. Well, Professor, I'm grateful that you spent the time with us. I hope you'll come back and we can have continue our conversation, maybe take one of these ideas and go deeply into it. But I'm really grateful that
Absolutely.
you spent some time with me.
Yes, appreciate it. I hope people listening to you have some good takeaway or something to reflect on. So if you want to share with me, you can send me a message. And yes, I would love to come back and share a little more.
Perfect.